This is bullshit, Mr. Brown. I'm so upset. What the fuck? God damn!
It's time. My newest obsession, my newest book obsession, my newest, arguably, depending on how the next 2 books go in the series, I'm on book 5 now, I don't know, arguably my favorite series of all time, Red Rising. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about this motherfucking series because I'm dying. I'm obsessed. I have gone through the ringer with this series. Today, we are just going to be talking about the first 3, so the original Red Rising trilogy, and why you should or should not read this. Who is it for? This is going to be spoiler free as all of my reviews are. So without further ado, let's talk about this. I'm so excited. I'm telling you, I am obsessed. Okay, so an overview of the summary of the series, okay? So this series is following this guy named Darrow. At the beginning of book 1, he's 16, he's just gotten married, and he is living on Mars in the mines underground Mars. The world that we're set in is pretty much our solar system, but it's kind of like set up into a hierarchy. Let's just go hierarchy. It's a hierarchy, okay? Based on different colors. So you have the golds at the very tippy top. Those are your leaders. At the bottom, you have your reds. Darrow is one of these reds. He is a miner living underground on Mars. These miners are tasked with mining this thing called helium-3, which is like the main fuel source for the society. And they've been told over and over and over again that Earth is overpopulated and they have to mine this helium-3 so that eventually the other colors will have enough fuel to come and terraform Mars and kind of expand through the universe, right? So when Darrow is faced with a enormous loss in his life, he is thrust into this situation with a rebellion that is starting to crop up, the Sons of Ares. These rebels task Darrow with infiltrating the Society of Golds and kind of moving up into the ranks so that they can have somebody on the inside. And through this, Darrow is forced to reckon with some of the realities that he has previously just accepted as truth, and finds out that maybe the world is a little bit different, or a lot bit different than what he was led to believe. This world is not wholly unique in any stretch of the imagination. I've seen a lot of people compare especially this first book to the Hunger Games, which I completely get. The majority of this first book takes place within a battle royale type of setting, a fight to the death. It's more like a chess game, in my opinion, kind of like a capture the flag, but it's capture other people, I guess. But definitely if you go into this thinking Hunger Games, you're going to get Hunger Games out of it. But I do think that there are plenty of things within this story, even within the first book, that are different enough to keep you interested and kind of keep you on your toes a little bit. You're just waiting for the next ball to drop. I mean, pretty much throughout this whole series. It is insane, okay? This story also reminded me personally a lot of those kind of classic dystopian stories like Fahrenheit 451, 1984, Brave New World. It has that sort of vibe. The world itself is really dark, okay? The hierarchy itself is based on a lot of control and deep set manipulation. I mean, it is like propaganda central. And the gold hierarchy paints all of this kind of control, deception, and punishment under the guise of for the greater good. And they kind of pit the lower castes of society against each other, so they're constantly squabbling amongst themselves and not really paying attention to what the higher ups are doing, which is very reminiscent of our own world, and I found that to be super disturbing, but really well done. And like I said before, it's very much like Brave New World. Everyone has their own specific function in society. Reds are kind of like the grunt workers, they are the miners, they're also like custodians, the golds are the leaders, the whites are the religious figureheads. The grays are like the police force. The yellows are like the doctors. Everyone has their own specific role to fulfill in this society. And if you take one toe out of that line, you're gone, okay? That's the end of the line for you. So I'm going to talk about characters in a little bit of a vague way, except for Darrow, because there's a lot of characters that are introduced throughout these first 3 books. But let's just say these are some of my absolute favorite characters. Darrow is arguably a little bit cliche in his motivations, and some of the things that he says are a tad bit like just too on the nose, if you know what I mean. He's very heavy-handed in his anger and his rebellion and his, hatred for the world that they live in. So I can definitely see someone read this and be like, that was a little bit cringy, but for me, I was just fist bumping the whole time. I was having a fucking awesome time. He's a hot-headed character. Like I said, he's filled with so much anger and rage, but he grows so much throughout the series, and his motivations that I originally found really cliche, they morph into something a little bit different and a little bit deeper. Throughout the series, he makes a huge shift from revenge to actual active rebellion against this society as a whole, and not just for his own personal loss. And despite the fact that we follow Darrow throughout the entirety of the series, he is not the most outstanding character in my opinion. I love Darrow. Don't get me wrong. I love me some Darrow. The side characters that we get are so outstanding. They are so well fleshed out. Their relationships are so well developed. I mean, you have Severo, who is this little dude who's just kind of crass. He's kind of impulsive and just delicious. He is so yummy. Obviously, with Severo, you get some dick jokes. If you don't like dick jokes, I don't know how to help you get a better sense of humor. I don't know, but I love a good dick joke. But also the cast of characters as a whole shows so many aspects of human nature, but not in a kind of caricature type of way, just in the sense that they're fleshed out, they're well-rounded, they feel like human beings. For the good and also for the bad. For the very, very bad, okay? Some of these characters are just evil. I am not a die-hard friendships girly. I know that a lot of people love friendships in their stories. I tend to like them, but I don't tend to fall hard for them, you know? And John Gwynne was able to convince me of his friendships in The Faithful and the Fallen. Pierce Brown is able to convince me of his friendships in Red Rising. I am very difficult to convince when it comes to friendships. I don't know if it's past experience and trauma. I have no idea, but these friendships are so amazing in this. Plot-wise, like I said, Red Rising is a little bit like a battle royale type of situation, but in book 2, we get this huge expansion. One thing I do have to say about book 2 is that there is a time jump between the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2. It's like 2 years, I think. I'm not a huge fan of time jumps, especially when we have to go back and kind of relive a couple of scenes from the time that we jumped. It took me a second to get into book 2. Book 2 expands the world. There's a lot more of the kind of space opera ship battles that I know that a lot of people are looking for when they're looking for a sci-fi series to read. I am new to sci-fi. I'm a new sci-fi girly, okay? So it was a little bit difficult for me to get into these spaceship battles initially, but by book 3, I was in it. I was in it to win it. It was delicious. It was delectable. It was delightful. I was loving it, okay? So if you read book 1 and you're like, this is good, but I want more sci-fi, just read book 2, baby girl. Okay, I promise the sci-fi is there. We just have to set it up in book 1. That is why I think this was one of the best sci-fi series for me to start as a fantasy lover, was because this first book is fantasy adjacent. Like I said, it's set in a battle royale type of situation. It's very Roman inspired. We have a lot of hand-to-hand combat and weapon use, you know, like swords and shit. So it's very fantasy adjacent. It's not too much for my brain to comprehend. So by the time we got to book 2, I was already attached to the characters, I was attached to the world, and I was more willing to kind of work a little bit harder to understand those big space battles, because that's just not what I'm used to. One thing that Pierce Brown does is that Pierce Brown throws your ass in there and he's not holding your hand. You just gotta fucking figure it out, okay? And it's not that it's jarring necessarily. Pierce Brown just really trusts his readers. He 100% believes that you're gonna figure it out, and I think you will too. I think you'll like it, okay? The story itself is also really brutal. Brown does not pull any punches when it comes to violence or gore or anything like that. And I think that the way that he writes it, which I'll get into his writing style in just a second, the way that he writes these violent scenes, it just makes it all the more gruesome and brutal and dark. But also with all of that darkness, there's an overarching feeling of hope throughout the first 3 books in this series. It just feels like there's a light at the end of the tunnel within all of this darkness. Also, we have Severo with the dick jokes, so we got a little bit of comedic relief, okay? So now getting into Pierce Brown's writing style. Pierce Brown's writing style is very punchy. The series is also written in first-person present tense, which is something that I don't read a lot of, but I think that it was the right choice to make. I don't think I could have read this in any other POV and have it affect me in the same way that it did. I think that POV choice goes so well with Pierce Brown's punchy, kind of direct writing style, especially in the scenes with violence. It's like Darrow is speaking directly to you, and it makes the action sequences seem more desperate and emotional, and also surprising at times, because Darrow doesn't tell us every single thing every single time, okay? He keeps some things to himself until the opportune moment. Brown really focuses on the senses when he writes violence. There's a lot less focus on what is happening physically, like what you can see, but there is a huge emphasis on like sound and feeling. So instead of like the slashing and dashing kind of action sequences, we have a crunching and gurgling type of action sequences. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because I feel like it makes sense in my head. Like John Gwynne is proficient at the slashing and dashing. Pierce Brown does crunching and gurgling so fucking well, okay? So who is this series for? Everybody. It's for everybody. I'm just kidding. So I think that if you're somebody who predominantly reads YA fantasy, I think this would be an amazing segue into adult sci-fi if that's something you're going for. Also, if you're reading adult fantasy and you're wanting to kind of squeeze into the sci-fi genre and not have too much of a learning curve, this is definitely something that I would recommend to you because that's what I did. That's what I did. And now I'm a sci-fi girly. There's so many sci-fis that I want to read now. Pierce Brown's writing style is very digestible. It's very accessible. And even though he throws you into this story and into this world and he doesn't hold your hand, his writing style makes everything seem a little bit simpler. Not simple as in like a negative, but it makes it a little bit easier for you to kind of ease your way into the world. So I think that regardless of where you're coming from, if you're wanting to get more into sci-fi, then I think this is a great choice. Also, like I said, if you're a fan of those classics, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, this is very reminiscent of that, but in like a sci-fi type of setting. Also, if you're in a reading slump, girl, pick this up. This series is insanely fast-paced. Pierce Brown does not let you rest, okay? Each of these chapters is like a punch in the gut. We're always moving. We're constantly learning new things. The world around us is constantly shifting because of the different political powers in play. It's so addicting. It's so incredibly addicting. So if you're in a reading slump or if you're wanting something super duper addictive that you can just fucking binge through, this is an amazing series for you to check out. Also, I know that this can be a little bit intimidating because it's a 6-book long series and I think there's still one more to come out. If you just want to read like a trilogy, a shorter trilogy, then Morningstar wraps up super duper well. I don't believe Pierce Brown was originally planning on expanding the series beyond Morningstar. So if you're just wanting to stop at Morningstar, you will be satisfied. I promise you will be satisfied. And then if you want more, there's more for you. There's more. And I am so glad there's more. But if you do just want that sort of short trilogy kind of experience, then you can just stop. You can just stop at Morningstar and we can talk about it because Morningstar is fan-fucking-tastic, okay? Morningstar was a 5 out of 5. Morningstar is one of my favorite books that I've ever read. It's one of my favorite books of the year. It's fan-fucking-tastic, and that book was like an emotional roller coaster. I was pretty much sobbing every time I picked it up because there were so many things that were happening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know down below if you've read this series. What do you think of it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Don't break my heart, okay? Don't break my heart. We can shit on it a little bit, but not too much because I'm thinking that this is gonna be my favorite series of all time. I hope you have a fantastic day today, and I hope you have a great week. Happy Sunday, and I will see you next time.